The moon had no name when the first humans arrived. It was just a number in a catalog, a small gray world circling a planet that circled a distant star. But 30 years later, the 847 people who lived there called it home. They called their settlement New Haven, and they had built it with their own hands from nothing but rock and hope. Danny Marsh stood at the window of his small office and looked out at the domes that covered the colony. The plastic was yellowed now, patched in 100 places. The air recyclers hummed and rattled, always on the edge of breaking down. Earth had stopped sending supplies 5 years ago. The Galactic conquered, the alliance of 12 alien species that ruled most of the known galaxy, barely remembered that humans existed at all. Danny was 53 years old. He had come to this moon as a young man full of dreams. Now he was the governor of a dying colony, and his only dream was to keep his people alive for one more year. A knock came at his door. Vance walked in without waiting for an answer. She was the chief engineer, a woman in her 40s with grease on her hands and dark circles under her eyes. She had not slept in 2 days because the water purification system had failed again. "We have a problem," she said. Danny almost laughed. They always had problems. Which one? "Ben found something in the mine. You need to come see it." Ben was the colony's only geologist. He was 26 years old, born on this moon, and he had never seen Earth except in pictures. His job was to find useful minerals in the rock beneath the surface. Most days he found nothing but dust. But today was different. Danny followed through the narrow tunnels that led down into the mining complex. The lights flickered above them. Everything in New Haven flickered. They walked for 10 minutes, going deeper and deeper, until they reached the tunnel where Ben was waiting. The young man's face was pale. His hands were shaking. "I don't know what it is," he said. "I was drilling into the rock face and my equipment just stopped, like it hit something that wasn't supposed to be there." Danny looked at the wall of the tunnel. At first he saw nothing unusual, then turned on her flashlight and he saw it. Crystals, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, embedded in the rock. They were the color of deep water, blue and green and purple all at once. They caught the light and scattered it in patterns that seemed almost alive. "I've never seen anything like this," Ben whispered. "They're not natural, the structure is too perfect. Someone made these." Danny felt a chill run down his spine. "Who? There was no one here before us. The survey said this moon was dead." Stepped closer to the crystals. She reached out her hand, and before Danny could stop her, she touched one. The tunnel filled with light. It was not harsh or blinding. It was soft, like sunlight through clouds, and it pulsed with a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. The crystals were glowing, all of them, and the glow was spreading through the rock itself. Then the images came. Danny saw stars. Millions of stars, billions of them, spinning in patterns he could not understand. He saw shapes moving between them, vast and beautiful, building something that stretched across the entire galaxy. He saw worlds being born and worlds dying. He saw time itself flowing like a river. And then he saw a message. It was not in any language he knew. It was not in words at all, but somehow he understood it. The message was simple: "We have been waiting for you." The light faded. The crystals went dark. Danny was on his knees, breathing hard, and Ben were beside him, their faces filled with the same shock and wonder that he felt. "What was that?" Ben asked. Was already pulling out her scanner, running it over the crystals. Her hands were steady now, her mind working fast. "It's a machine," she said. "No, more than that, it's a computer, a database. It's been sitting here for, I can't even calculate how long, millions of years at least." "Who put it here?" Danny asked. "I don't know, but whoever they were, they wanted us to find it." They spent the next 3 days studying the crystals, worked without rest, pulling data from the strange structure. Ben mapped its extent and found that it went deep into the moon, far deeper than they could dig. Danny tried to keep the colony running while his mind raced with questions that had no answers. On the fourth day, called them back to the tunnel. She had found something. "It's an archive," she said. "A library. It contains information about thousands of star systems, technologies we've never imagined, history going back to the beginning of the galaxy. And there's more." She pressed her hand against the largest crystal. The light returned, gentler this time, and new images appeared. They saw a map of the galaxy with hundreds of points marked in glowing gold. "These are coordinates," said. "There are other archives like this one, hidden all over the galaxy, and this one is telling us where to find them." Ben leaned forward. Why would anyone do this? The answer came in another burst of images. They saw a civilization at its peak, powerful and wise, masters of science beyond anything the galactic conquered had ever achieved. They called themselves the Architects, and they knew they were dying. The images showed war disease, something dark and terrible sweeping across the stars. The Architects could not save themselves, but they could save what they had learned. They could hide it away and wait for someone worthy to find it. The last image was the clearest of all. It showed a small blue planet third from its sun, covered in water and green growing things. Earth. The Architects had seen humanity coming, long before humans had even learned to walk upright. They had chosen them. Danny sat in the darkness of the tunnel for a long time after and Ben had gone. He thought about his colony, his 847 people struggling to survive on a moon that no one cared about. He thought about the galactic conquered and the 12 alien species who looked at humans like insects. And he thought about the Architects, whoever they were, who had looked across millions of years and seen something in humanity worth saving. Everything was about to change. Danny did not know if his people were ready. He did not know if he was ready. But ready or not, the galaxy would soon learn that the tiny human colony on an unnamed moon had found something that would shake the stars themselves. The forgotten outpost would be forgotten no longer. The news traveled faster than Danny had expected. Someone in the colony had sent a message to a trading ship. The trading ship had told a space station. The space station had told everyone. Within 2 weeks, the first alien ships appeared in orbit above New Haven. Danny watched them through the colony's only telescope. There were 7 of them, long and silver, covered in weapons. He knew those ships. Everyone in the galaxy knew them. They belonged to They were the oldest and most powerful species in the galactic conquered. They had been traveling between stars while humans were still living in caves. They believed they were the rightful rulers of the galaxy, and most other species did not argue with them. Those who argued usually regretted it. The message came 1 hour after the ships arrived. Ambassador Al wished to meet with the leader of the human settlement. It was not a request. Danny met him in the colony's largest dome, the one they used for town meetings and celebrations. Al was tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes like polished stones. He wore robes of deep red, the color of nobility. Behind him stood 4 soldiers in armor that could probably survive a bomb. "You have found something that belongs to us," Al said. His voice was cold and smooth. "You will give it to us now." Danny kept his face calm. His heart was pounding, but he had learned long ago not to show fear. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. The archive was discovered on our moon in our territory. How can it belong to you?" Al's eyes narrowed. Everything of value in this galaxy belongs to the conquered, and within the conquered, everything of true importance belongs to the. This is how it has always been. This is how it will always be. "With respect," Danny said, "we found it, we activated it, we are studying it. Our claim is valid under conquered law." The ambassador laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Conquered law was written to protect civilized species. You are humans. You have been in space for barely 2 centuries. You are children playing with toys you do not understand. Danny thought about his people. He thought about the years of struggle, the broken equipment, the empty supply ships that never came. He thought about how the conquered had abandoned them, how they had never once offered help. And now they wanted to take the one thing that might change everything. "No," he said. Al stopped laughing. "What did you say?" "I said no. The archive stays with us until we receive guarantees for our colony's safety and recognition of our discovery. Those are our terms." For a long moment, no one moved. The soldiers put their hands on their weapons. Danny did not step back. He was not a brave man by nature, but he had nothing left to lose. Al studied him with those cold stone eyes. "You are either very foolish or very brave," he said. "I have not decided which, but I will return, and when I do, you will not have a choice." He turned and walked out of the dome. His soldiers followed. An hour later, the ships were gone. But Danny knew they would be back. The next few days were chaos. Worked around the clock, trying to learn everything she could from the archive before the return. Ben helped her, mapping the structure and cataloging the data. The rest of the colony prepared for the worst. They had no weapons that could fight alien warships, but they had determination and the stubborn human refusal to give up. Then something strange happened. Was working alone in the tunnel when a new ship appeared in orbit. This one was different from the vessels. It was round and white, decorated with patterns of flowing lines. It belonged to a species known for diplomacy and peace. The sent only one representative. Her name was Counselor, and she came alone, without soldiers or weapons. She was smaller than a human, with soft blue fur and large dark eyes that seemed to hold great kindness. "I am not here to take anything," she told Danny. "I am here to understand." Danny brought her to the archive, showed her the crystals, the data, the message from the architects, listened carefully, asked questions, and touched nothing without permission. "This is remarkable," she said. "The architects are known to us only as legends. We thought they were myths, stories told by primitive species to explain the mysteries of the universe. But this is real." "Why did they choose us?" Ben asked. It was the question that had been haunting him since the beginning. "We're nothing special, we're just humans." Was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and placed her hand on one of the crystals. Nothing happened. The archive remained dark. "Try it," she said too. Touched the crystal. Immediately it began to glow. The light spread through the tunnel and the archive came alive. Nodded slowly. "I thought so. The archive responds only to human contact. Your neural patterns, your brain chemistry, something about the way your species thinks. The architects designed it specifically for you." Before anyone could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the colony. Danny ran to the surface, followed by the others. When he looked up at the sky through the dome, his blood ran cold. They had returned, but this time they had not sent 7 ships. They had sent 70, and leading them was a massive warship, the biggest Danny had ever seen, bristling with weapons that could turn the entire moon to ash. A new message came through. It was not from Al. It was from High Commander Al, his superior, and his voice was filled with contempt. "Humans," he said, "you were given a chance to obey. You refused. Now we will take what we want, and your little colony will learn the price of defying the." The soldiers landed 1 hour later. They came in armored shuttles, hundreds of them, and they marched straight toward the mining complex. Danny and his people could only watch. They had no way to stop them. Was still in the tunnel with the archive. Danny tried to reach her on the radio, but there was no answer. The soldiers pushed through the colony's weak defenses like they were made of paper. Then the ground shook. A light burst from beneath the surface, blue and green and purple, brighter than the sun. It shot up through the rock and spread across the sky like a dome made of pure energy. The soldiers were thrown backward. Their weapons failed. Their shuttles fell from the air. The archive had activated its defenses, and it had chosen to protect the humans. When the light faded, they retreated to their ships. They did not attack again. They could not. The shield around New Haven held strong, and nothing they did could break through. Danny found in the tunnel, her hand still pressed against the largest crystal. She was smiling. "They made it for us," she whispered. "They really made it for us." The tiny colony had won its first battle, but the war was just beginning. Word of what happened at New Haven spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A tiny human colony had stood against the mighty and survived. An ancient archive had chosen to protect them. The legends of the architects were true. Ships began arriving from every corner of known space. They came from the insect-like, from the aquatic, and from species that humans had never even heard of. Some came to study. Some came to trade. Some came simply to see the impossible with their own eyes. The colony of 847 people suddenly had visitors numbering in the thousands. Danny barely had time to sleep. He spent his days meeting with ambassadors, scientists, merchants, and spies. He had never been trained for diplomacy. He had never wanted it, but he was the governor, and his people were counting on him to protect what they had found. Worked in the archive day and night. The shield had lowered after the retreated, allowing controlled access to the tunnel. Scientists from a dozen species came to study the crystals, but its discovery remained true. The archive responded only to human touch. Without or another human present, it remained dark and silent. This made the aliens uncomfortable. It made them furious. Ben spent his time translating the data that pulled from the archive. There was so much information that he could barely process it all. Star charts showing regions of space that no living species had explored. Blueprints for machines that seemed like magic. Medical knowledge that could cure diseases thought to be incurable. And history, billions of years of history, telling the story of the architects and their great civilization. One night, Ben came to Danny with a discovery that changed everything. "I know why they chose us," he said. His eyes were wide with wonder. The architects weren't a single species. They were a coalition, dozens of different races working together, and they didn't just evolve naturally. They were created. Danny frowned. Created by who? By something even older. Something we don't have a name for. The architects were part of an experiment, a way of seeding the galaxy with intelligent life. And when they knew their time was ending, they continued the experiment. They planted the seeds for new species on thousands of worlds, including Earth. Yes, but that's not the important part. Ben pulled out a tablet covered in notes. The architects knew that most species would develop in predictable ways. They would become intelligent, build civilizations, reach the stars. But they would also become rigid, set in their ways, unable to adapt to new challenges. Like the Danny nodded slowly. He had seen it himself. They were powerful, but they never changed. Their technology, their culture, their way of thinking had been the same for millions of years. Humans are different, Ben continued. Earth is a chaotic world. Natural disasters, ice ages, mass extinctions, constantly shifting climates. Life there had to adapt or die, and humans adapted better than anything else. We evolved the ability to solve problems that had never existed before, to imagine things that had never been imagined, to keep trying even when everything seemed hopeless. The architects were looking for that, Danny said. Exactly. They called it the variable, a species that could change, grow, and surprise even them. They tested thousands of worlds, but only one produced what they were looking for: us. Danny sat in silence for a long time. He thought about all the times humans had been dismissed as primitive, as children, as insects compared to the ancient races of the conquered. And all along, they had been exactly what the architects had been searching for. The next day, he shared the discovery with the alien ambassadors. Most of them listened with interest. They were excited, calling it the most important revelation in galactic history. The other species reacted with curiosity, skepticism, or quiet acceptance. But they did not accept it at all. High Commander Al had remained in orbit with his fleet, waiting and watching. When he heard Ben's findings, he sent a message to every ship around New Haven. "These claims are lies," he declared. "The humans are manipulating the archive to serve their own ambitions. They are a primitive species trying to steal power that does not belong to them. They will not permit this corruption of history." 3 days later, the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen appeared in the sky above New Haven. Hundreds of warships, armed with weapons that could crack planets in half. Al had called in every ship his people had. He sent an ultimatum to Danny directly. "Surrender the archive within one cycle," he said. "Give us full access and control. Abandon your claims and accept authority, or we will destroy your colony and take what we want from the ashes." Danny gathered his people in the main dome. They were scared. They had every right to be. The shield had protected them before, but could it stand against that much firepower? No one knew. Stood up and addressed the crowd. "There's another option," she said. "The archive contains coordinates to something called the Nexus. It's the central repository of the architects, the place where all their knowledge is stored. If we can reach it if we can prove our claim there, even they would have to accept the truth." "How far is it?" Danny asked. "Far, across uncharted space, through regions no one has ever explored. It would be dangerous beyond anything we've faced. And if we stay here," looked out at the fleet filling the sky, "then we die, and everything the architects left for us falls into the hands of people who will use it to conquer instead of share." The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. A small team would take the colony's only working scout ship and race to the Nexus. The rest would stay behind and hold out as long as they could. Ben and their best pilot, a young man named Sam, would make the journey. Danny would stay to lead the defense and buy them time. The night before they left, Danny found standing by the archive, her hand resting on the crystals. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I don't think anyone could be ready. But that's what makes us human, isn't it? We do impossible things because we don't know they're impossible." Danny smiled. "The architects knew what they were doing when they chose us." "Let's hope so," said, "because we're about to find out if they were right." At dawn, the Dusty Sparrow lifted off from New Haven and shot toward the stars. Behind them, the fleet began to move. The race for the Nexus had begun. The Dusty Sparrow was not a beautiful ship. She was old, patched together from spare parts, and her engines made sounds that worried Sam every time he pushed them too hard. But she flew, and right now that was all that mattered. Sam sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls. He was 28 years old, born on New Haven like Ben, and he had learned to fly by taking apart broken shuttles and figuring out how they worked. He had never left the solar system before. Now he was leading a mission across the galaxy. Sat behind him, studying the data from the archive on her tablet. The coordinates to the Nexus were clear, but the route was not. They had to pass through regions of space that no living species had mapped. There could be anything out there. Black holes, radiation storms, hostile creatures, or dangers that no one had ever imagined. Ben was in the back, running calculations and trying not to think about what would happen if they failed. The fate of humanity and maybe the entire galaxy rested on their shoulders. It was not a comfortable weight. They had been traveling for 3 days when the first ships appeared behind them. "They're fast," Sam said, checking his sensors. "Faster than us. They'll catch up in about 6 hours. Looked at the map. "There's a nebula ahead. The readings say it's dense, full of interference. If we go through it, they might lose us. Or we might fly into a star we didn't see coming. Do we have a choice?" Sam smiled grimly and pushed the engines harder. "I guess not." The nebula was like flying through a cloud of fire. Colors swirled around them, red and orange and gold, so thick they could barely see 100 meters ahead. The sensors flickered and died. Sam had to fly by instinct, trusting his gut and hoping his luck would hold. It held barely. They came out the other side with scorch marks on the hull and one engine running rough, but they were alive. The ships were gone, lost somewhere in the chaos behind them. But they were not alone. Another ship drifted ahead of them, damaged and dark. It was one of the vessels that had come to New Haven to study the archive. Something had attacked it. "We should help them," Sam said. Shook her head. "We don't have time. Every hour we delay, they get closer. They could be dying over there. And if we stop, billions might die later. We have to keep going." Sam looked at the drifting ship. He thought about Counselor who had been so kind, about the soft blue fur and the gentle eyes. He thought about what it meant to be human. "No," he said, "we stop. If we become the kind of people who leave others to die, then we don't deserve what the architects left us." Started to argue, but Ben put a hand on her shoulder. "He's right," he said quietly. "The architects chose us because of who we are. Let's not prove them wrong." They docked with the ship an hour later. The damage was bad. The hull had been torn open in several places, and most of the crew was dead. But in the medical bay, they found survivors. 5 injured but alive, including a historian named. Was old by standards, her fur gray and her movement slow. But her mind was sharp, and when she learned where they were going, her eyes filled with wonder. "The Nexus," she whispered. "I have studied the architects my entire life. I never believed I would see their greatest creation." "You know about it?" Ben asked. "I know the stories. They say the Nexus holds the answer to every question ever asked. They say it was built at the heart of a dying star, where time itself bends and breaks. They say only those worthy can enter." "How do we prove we're worthy?" Smiled weakly. "That, young human, is the question." They took the survivors aboard the Dusty Sparrow. It was crowded now, too crowded, and their supplies were running low. But Sam refused to leave anyone behind. 3 more days passed. They crossed through empty space, past dead worlds and ancient ruins, following the coordinates that the archive had given them. They found their trail again and sent faster ships to intercept them. Twice they had to hide in asteroid fields, waiting in silence while enemy patrols searched for them. Once they had to fight, using the Sparrow's weak weapons to disable a scout ship that got too close. On the 7th day, they reached the edge of the final region. Ahead of them lay a dying star, its surface boiling and churning, throwing off waves of energy that made their sensors scream. "The Nexus is in there?" Sam asked, staring at the inferno. "According to the coordinates," said, "somewhere in the corona, protected by something we can't see." Leaned forward in her seat. "There will be tests," she said. "The architects did not leave their greatest treasure unguarded. They would want to know that whoever found it deserved it." "What kind of tests?" "Not tests of strength or technology. The architects valued other things. Wisdom, compassion, the ability to work together even when it seems impossible." They flew into the star's corona, and the tests began. The first was a maze of energy barriers that shifted and changed, blocking their path. Sam flew for hours, trying to find a way through, but every route he took led to a dead end. Finally, suggested they stop fighting the maze and let it guide them. Sam released the controls, trusting the ship to find its own way, and the barriers parted. The second test was harder. They encountered another ship this time, trapped in a gravity well and slowly being pulled into the star. The crew begged for help, wanted to leave them. They were enemies, after all, the same people who had threatened to destroy New Haven. But Sam remembered what he had said about and Ben remembered what the architects had valued. They rescued the crew, despite everything. The gravity well released them immediately after. The test had been passed. The third test was the simplest and the hardest. They had to say why they had come, not what they wanted to take, but why they believed they deserved it. Spoke for all of them. She talked about New Haven, about the struggle to survive, about the small colony that had never given up. She talked about humanity, about their flaws and their strengths, about the chaos of Earth that had forged them into something unique. And she talked about the future, about sharing what they found with everyone, because knowledge was not meant to be hoarded. The way opened, and before them, rising out of the fire like a dream made real, stood the Nexus. It was vast beyond imagining, a structure of crystal and light that seemed to exist outside of time itself. And at its heart, waiting for them, was the answer to everything. The Nexus was not just a building or a machine. It was a living memory, a record of everything the architects had ever known or dreamed or hoped. As the dusty sparrow passed through its outer shell, felt the structure reaching out to her, welcoming her, recognizing her as something it had been waiting for across the long, empty ages. They landed on a platform of pure light. The air was warm and smelled like spring rain, though they were inside a dying star. Nothing here followed the rules that governed the rest of the universe. The architects had bent reality itself to create this place. Stepped out first, followed by Ben and Sam, and the crew they had rescued hung back, uncertain, watching with eyes full of fear and wonder. A figure appeared before them. It was not solid, not quite real, but it had the shape of something that might once have been alive. It spoke without sound, its words forming directly in their minds. "You have come at last," it said. "We have waited so long." "Who are you?" asked. "I am what remains of the architects, a fragment of our collective memory, preserved to greet those who would inherit our legacy. You are human." "Yes. We knew you would come. We saw the potential in your species when your ancestors first looked up at the stars and wondered what they were. You were chaos and creativity, stubbornness and hope, all the things we had lost over the long centuries of our civilization. You were the variable we had been searching for." Ben stepped forward. "Why us? There are so many species in the galaxy, so many civilizations older and more advanced than ours." The figure seemed to smile. "Age is not wisdom. Power is not strength. The species you call the have existed for millions of years, but they stopped growing long ago. They reached a peak and stayed there, unable to change, unable to imagine anything beyond what they already knew. They are perfect, and perfection is death." "But humans keep changing," Sam said quietly. "Yes, you fail and try again. You break things and build them better. You love and fight and dream impossible dreams. You are messy and contradictory and beautifully, wonderfully alive. That is what we valued. That is what we hope to preserve." Looked around at the vast chamber, at the light that pulsed through the walls like blood through veins. "What do you want us to do?" The figure extended its hand, and suddenly their minds were filled with knowledge. Not just facts and figures, but understanding. They saw technology that could reshape worlds, energy sources that could power civilizations for eternity, medical advances that could extend life indefinitely, and methods of travel that could cross the galaxy in hours instead of years. And they saw the warning. The architects had not fallen to war or disease or natural disaster. They had fallen to themselves. They had grown so powerful that they forgot why power mattered. They had hoarded their knowledge, used it to dominate instead of share, and in the end, they had destroyed themselves in a conflict over who would control the future. "This is our gift and our burden," the figure said. "The knowledge to change everything, and the choice of how to use it. We give it to you because we believe you will choose wisely, but the choice is yours alone." Understood. The architects were not making them rulers of the galaxy. They were making them guardians, caretakers, stewards of a legacy that could save everyone or destroy everything. She looked at the crew, standing apart from the others, watching with hostility and hunger. They wanted the power for themselves. They would use it to dominate, to conquer, to ensure that the remained supreme forever. And she knew what she had to do. "We will share it," she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart was racing. "All of it, with every species in the galaxy, including the knowledge belongs to everyone, or it belongs to no one." The figure nodded slowly. "That is the answer we hoped you would give. It is the only answer that leads to life instead of death. The technology will be released to all freely and without condition. What each species does with it will be their own choice, but the chance, at least, will be equal. The decision was made. The Nexus began to broadcast, sending its knowledge out across the stars to every ship and every world and every being that could receive it. There was no way to stop it, no way to control it. The secrets of the architects were free. Meanwhile, back at New Haven, Danny watched the sky in despair. The fleet had finally broken through the shield. Their ships were descending toward the colony, weapons armed, ready to take what they had come for. And then the broadcast reached them. Every ship in the fleet received it at the same time. Every soldier, every commander, every officer suddenly knew what the Nexus contained. And they knew that everyone else in the galaxy knew too. High Commander Al sat in silence on his bridge, watching the data scroll across his screens. The power he had wanted to claim for his people was now available to all. There was nothing left to take, nothing left to fight for. The humans had won not by defeating but by making defeat meaningless. He ordered his fleet to stand down. 1 month later, New Haven was no longer a forgotten colony. It was the center of the galaxy, a meeting place for every species that wanted to learn about the architects and their legacy. Ships arrived daily, bringing scientists and diplomats and ordinary people who wanted to see the place where everything had changed. Danny stood on a hill outside the main dome, watching a shuttle land next to a cruiser next to a human freighter. A year ago, such a sight would have been impossible. Now it was just another day. Found him there. She had returned from the Nexus 3 weeks earlier, tired but triumphant. Sam and Ben were somewhere in the colony, helping to coordinate the research teams. Had gone back to her people, carrying with her stories that would be told for generations. "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing?" Danny asked. "Giving it all away, I mean. We could have kept some of it for ourselves, used it to make humanity powerful." Shook her head. That's what the would have done. That's what the architects themselves did at the end, and look where it got them. So we just trust everyone to use it well. We trust everyone to have the chance. What they do with it is up to them, but at least the choice is theirs. She smiled and looked up at the stars. The architects didn't choose us because we were perfect. They chose us because we keep trying to be better. That's all any of us can do. Danny thought about the tiny colony that had started everything. 847 people, struggling to survive on a barren moon. Now they were part of something larger than they had ever imagined. The architects had been right. Humans were the variable, the spark of chaos and hope that the galaxy needed, and their story was only beginning. Far above, in the darkness between stars, the Nexus continued its broadcast, sharing the wisdom of ages with anyone who would listen. The gift had been given. The future was waiting. And somewhere, in a place beyond time and death, the last echoes of the architects watched their inheritors take their first steps into tomorrow, and they were satisfied.